Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed. This is the show where we discuss everybody from the biggest of names to the deepest of sleepers. I am your host, Maxwell Baumbach, and I'm joined by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillaspie. Stephen, how are you doing tonight?
Maxwell, what's up, my man? I have had a hectic weekend. Saturday, right? Yep, Saturday was my son's birthday. So
nice. Happy birthday to him.
Thank you. He turned 12. He got a New Balance hoodie and some Air Forces. He really wanted some Forces, so he's forced up now. Today, Sunday, as we're recording, I went to our neighbor's daughter had a birthday party, and I'm done being around tons of kids, man. Like, I already have a ton of kids in my house anyway.
Yeah.
So adding more to that has just been very, very draining. But I'm glad that I get to be here with you, man. How was your weekend?
It was good. And yeah, like there's the thing about like other people's kids, and I don't mean that in a way of like, oh, other people, everyone else is a bad parent except me. Like, I don't mean it in that way, but it's like the unpredictability of just like, oh, like this other kid just punched another kid. Is this kid gonna freak out? It's too much sometimes when you've got kids all over the place and you don't know what's going to set somebody off. So it was good. Yeah, it was a good weekend. We had to like really scramble plans wise. Our in-laws were supposed to be in town. Illinois has been like decimated with snow. And then like the part of the state that they have to get through to get to us had like freezing rain, and there's like no infrastructure down there. So like they don't even have like salt trucks where I was from the middle of nowhere. So like they don't have like salt trucks by where she lives. So there's no way to like, you can't go anywhere once it gets bad down there. So we improvise. So just kind of, we're doing stuff on the fly, spent a lot of time in the snow, went to a, like one of those like indoor, like slide and ball pit kind of places today.
Oh yeah.
They got like all different slides and stuff. So had a good time there, but yeah, it's been a fun weekend. Also, longtime listeners of the show will know, like 4 weeks ago, I cut my thumb really bad making jambalaya.
Yeah.
My daughter requested jambalaya, and I'm showing it off. No cut on the thumb this time. My knife skills were way better. Did not slice my hand open in the kitchen. So as far as I'm concerned, this has been a really good weekend, and got a lot of ball in this weekend too. So caught some fun sleepers. I spent a little more time on one of the guys that we're talking about tonight. So it was great. This is a jumbo episode of Draft.
It's the big show.
It is the big show. So we are going to be talking about some of our favorite and some of the most interesting and most confusing big men in the 2025 class. Sort of happened incidentally. Like, we'd been chopping it up over text about guys we wanted to talk about this week. We wanted to do the Khaman Maluach conversation. And then a lot of the other sleepers and guys we were kicking around were bigs. We said, hey, let's just make it the big man episode. So we are going to open with Khaman Maluach. Maluach is a 7'2", 250-pound, 18-year-old freshman out of Duke. I think one of the most interesting and, like, I guess polarizing guys in the class, depending on who you're talking to, the day of the week, what somebody values as a scout. So Maluach is averaging 20.4 minutes per game. In those minutes, he is scoring 8.3 points, registering 6.2 rebounds, 0.4 assists to 0.7 turnovers. He has 1.1 blocks per game and 0.2 steals. Shooting splits are very interesting. He's 72.2% from the field. He is 20% from three. He's taken 10 threes over the course of the year. He's made 2 of them. And he is also 73.6% at the free throw line. Maluach is fascinating because, like, you just look at him and, like, physically, like, it's there.
Anybody want a peanut? Yeah.
And I feel like everything beyond that, I've heard a wide array of takes on from people I really respect. Like, some people being like, oh yeah, no, he's awesome. Some people being like, no, I think he's, like, actually kind of bad. So where do you settle on the Khaman Maluach spectrum? Like, how are you feeling about him at the stage, and just what are you seeing in this game?
Yes. I spent my whole weekend working on a Maluach piece that he is like going to be the featured prospect of my article this week. And there's a perception, Maxwell, like we could take this conversation because it's Maluach in a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
I think that what he brings to the table, one is just like his enormity. You know, he is and teams value big men of his size with mobility, with good hand-eye coordination, and the ability to eventually be a rim deterrent. Like the Lakers recently tried to acquire Mark Williams, and their first round pick that they just took this past year in Dalton Connect, and other future draft picks to bring in Mark Williams, who is good, but is not like a world beater. He's injury prone. He's missed more games than he's played. He's not a good rim deterrent, but he is a rim running big, and that is
so
valuable.
big that it's like maybe he could be a deterrent, even if he's not perfect at it right now. Like that's part of the idea.
Yeah. He blocked some shots in college. Like he could do it there's so much value just of a player like that. And I'll go ahead and spoil some stuff from the article. I'm not going to share everything, obviously, because over at NoCeilingsNBA.com, you guys will be able to read that for 100% free, right? So, the thing that strikes me odd with him is that how good his offense is and how inconsistent his defense is. You know?
Yeah.
And I know that you have to add in the qualifier of he's really only been playing organized basketball for about 5 years. So the fact that he can come into D1 basketball, play for Duke University, and be considered the top ranked prospect in his draft class is a huge deal, right? So you have he's got the aptitude to be better at basketball, right? Like he's just naturally gifted and talented at this game, right? There's also the conversation, Maxwell, if you look at previous draft classes, like his archetype of a big has proven to be valuable in the NBA. But if you look at the way that the draft shakes out, typically more project-y players will go ahead, right? Like if you look at the draft of like TJ Salon was taken over Donovan Clingan, Yves Missy, like Zach Edey, like a bunch of traditionally skilled rim running bigs. Teams can sometimes prioritize like the flash in the pan dudes over like I would say like a rudimentary style of game because it's easy.
Yeah, it's like, just a fundamentally unsexy brand of basketball that like it like gets underdrafted, but it's also like are you settling for hitting a single kind of a thing or a double even versus like going for the home run?
Exactly. Like it's more functional for me with a family of 6, Maxwell, to have a minivan, even though I would rather have a Corvette Stingray, right? Like that's my dream car. I would much rather have a Stingray. And theoretically, like I could be much cooler driving around in that car. It's just not functional for me right now. Like I love my minivan though. My minivan gets me everywhere I want to go. It fits my whole family. We can go grocery shopping with a full family. It does all the things that I need it to do. And like that's essentially what Maluach is, right? Like he is going to be extremely reliable because you can describe exactly what he does in probably 10 words, right? But if you look at some of these other projecty players, it's like, well, he can't do this, this, or this, but he could, but he also is this, like he has these physical dimensions and he might be able to shoot it someday, right? Like the name of the article that I'm putting out for Maluach this week is that unicorns aren't real. And I think that like perfectly describes Maluach. It's like, I'm not going to be like this super duper high ceiling guy to the point to where like I'm going to be able to create off the bounce and get my own shot and hit 40-foot jumpers, but I can do all the things that an NBA team is going to need from a big man.
Yeah. So I think that's where I'm like more on the bullish side of the Maluach conversation. So I'm with you. Like, I think the quote unquote, like garbage man, big stuff he's really good at. I think, and I always want to be careful over indexing on like non pre-draft year footage. Like I know a lot of people really value that. I think that's fine. But I do think there is something to like, well, why didn't this happen in the ACC or why didn't your coach trust you to do A, B, or C? I think some of like the passing touch and shooting touch and like willingness to shoot stuff that we saw in the Basketball Africa League tape and the Basketball Without Borders tape and things like that makes me sort of believe that there could be more ball skill and shooting touch here than we've gotten to see. And I think if that is real, suddenly he's a much higher ceiling player. I think to your point that like the best offensive bigs in the NBA have so much like on ball talent now that it's like it's hard for me to see him making up that much ground. But I think that given his dimensions and how good he is at the basics, that if he can just like knock down an occasional trailer three, like suddenly he is just like a way more valuable player who just becomes a tougher cover and can do a little bit more on the court. I think like let's do sort of a full picture breakdown of his game. Do you want to do offense first or defense?
We can do offense because I think that's going to be where people are going to have the ceiling versus floor discussion with him the most, right? Like,
sure.
And in my opinion, the way that I would evaluate Maluach, and I know this probably is contrary to some philosophical like fundamentals for a bunch of other people. If he can do some of those things that you touched on, Maxwell, like the stuff that you touched on with like the basketball without borders, NBA Africa, like all those things, that's great. I'm not even considering that if I'm drafting Maluach.
Sure, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Like if he can do it, that's fantastic. He could show me that stuff whenever he steps on the court. But like if I'm considering drafting him, I am not even thinking about spacing the floor. I am not even thinking about short roll playmaking. I am looking at
DHO time, baby. Let's run some delay action right now. Yeah.
I'm not even considering that because if you look, Maxwell, starting centers in the league that get significant burn, like a third of the league is traditional rim running big men.
Yeah.
I like went and like made a concerted effort. That's not like that is not
throwing
what's the
out
word
numbers.
that I'm looking for?
Yeah.
I'm
like,
not
he'd be top 50.
I'm not being hyperbolic.
Yeah.
I'm not being hyperbolic. Like that is legit what's going on. The NBA, about a third, it's actually a little bit more, but I'll round down. About a third of the NBA runs offensive systems with starting big men that do the things that Maluach does right now, right? He's a massive human being. He's listed at 250. I don't know if that's rounding up to be conservative because I've seen him get pushed out off a position by people who were smaller and like notably smaller. But that's good because he can grow into that massive frame. I mean, Maxwell, he's listed to have a standing reach of like 9'8". That's you can't, like Corey always says, you can't teach that stuff, right? Like that is like something that you're drafting that on day one in the NBA, he will be the size that he's listed at, and he will have as long as arm as he has. Like that is going to be an absolute truth, right? He sets very good screens, in my opinion. You know, like already at such a young age with little experience, he sets fantastic screens. And that's going to be impactful, right? Because he's carving out pathways for these dynamic ball handlers. And then he's got great coordination, Maxwell, like midair, like ball tracking, climbing the ladder coordination. He gets up high, he catches the ball, he'll come down with it. And weirdly enough, he appears to be more athletic on offense than defense. Like that shows up on like second efforts and stuff like that to me. I really value the putback, like the lunch pill stuff that he can do. Follow misses, set screens, rebounds, ball tracks, lob threat. Like that is day one stuff that he can come in the NBA and do.
Yep. Yeah, I'm right there with you. So I like the screening, like you mentioned. He is 30 for 33 on pick and roll possessions as a lob man.
Yes.
As a roll man this year. Like 100th percentile on synergy, which is something you do not come by very often. Like this is a dude you can just like have rolled to the basket or plop in the dunker spot, and he will 1000% feast on the easy ones, which like, look, I love bigs. Like scouting big men is like my favorite position to scout. I get like loving to dive into the particulars and like the micro skills and stuff like that of a player, but like ultimately an NBA team is just going to be like, can you roll to the basket and dunk the ball? A lot of the times, like that is the difference between like why a guy like Yves Missi is playing a lot more than a player like PJ Hall. You know what I mean? Where it's like PJ Hall has like a lot more micro skill stuff. He can like kind of shoot it a little bit. He could put the ball on the deck. He can make these on the go passes.
Footwork is cleaner.
Yeah. And it's like Yves Missi like rolls really hard and dunks and like, just moves around the floor better. Like it's a lot of times it is the simple things that just makes the big difference. And I think like Khaman Maluach rocks at the simple stuff. He has the best offensive rebound rate in the ACC. In conference play, he has a 21.7 offensive rebound rate, which you just don't see. You don't see that in a high major conference, and sure, it's a down year for the ACC. That's awesome. That is stellar, because even if you're saying like, oh, well, you know, there's not a lot of bigs that can give him trouble in that league this year or whatever, then what better way to show that than to just produce it in near historical clip on the offensive glass.
You would rather him perform like the bigs aren't on his level and say that they're not, right? Than be like, why is he having such a hard time? Like, I just went and watched Maxime Raynaud. We'll talk about him later.
Sure.
There are times where he has the size advantage and doesn't make good use of it. Like, Maluach is like, I'm going to devour you.
Yeah, one of the top things I have in my notes offensively is just it's very, very difficult to go small against him on offense. Like, he is going to absolutely punish the heck out of any mismatch, especially on the boards. Like post positioning, whatever. Like Corey's talked about this a lot. I saw that you had it in the notes. Like Duke's point guard situation isn't great as far as just like having a point guard that's going to spoon feed him lobs. Like I think on a lot of other teams, he'd probably be scoring a lot more points if that was the sort of system that they ran. So he's not like just getting these super easy looks all the time. Like there's times where like, Tyrese Proctor misses him quite a bit. It feels like out of ball screens. But like, yeah, he's going to punish smaller guys. And he goes up so strong every single time. Yes. I love guys that go up like they just want to rip the rim off the basket. He's one of those guys. But he's also got like weirdly soft touch. Like when it's not a dunk, this isn't a guy who's like tripping over his own feet or can't do it. He's 73.7% on layups at the rim in the half court, which is 19 shots. But then you look at the free throw percentage. He's really good on free throws, 73.6% at the free throw line. I just sort of buy the overall touch with him. And when he does take the occasional three, which he's taken 10 this year. So like if this is the whole like you're not counting on it thing, I agree. I think his jumper mechanics like look like a good big guy jump shot. If that
they're totally
makes
fine.
Sense. Yeah. Like there's nothing where it's like, oh, I don't really know about that. Like it looks fine. It looks like it could be a thing he does when he's left open, if nothing else. So
yeah, Horford's
all good.
Jumper isn't like aesthetically beautiful, right? Sure. But he found a way to be able to be reliable from deep. And I'm going to talk about this in my piece too, but like Donovan Clingan made, I think like 2 jumpers or something like that as a big man. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, like this guy, he might have a 3. And like, I don't think Portland was ever like, oh, we got to draft him. But because I would be shocked if it, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a thought in their head, but I don't think it was like the crux of his draft stock. You know what I mean? Totally. Like that wasn't where he was going to make his money coming into the league. And it's just like one of those things, Maxwell, like if you can come in and do it, that's fan freaking tastic, dude. Thank you so much for being able to shoot threes. But if you don't do it, we're going to love you all the same, no matter what. Like I went through and watched every single one of his, 3-pointers, and it took me like 3 minutes. Right. So it's not very long. And there's some ugly misses, man. Like he misses them long, but he steps into his shot confidently. He won't take a shot if no one passes him the ball, if that makes sense, right? Like he's not going to be up top on high running DHOs and like the big ignore him and stand way far deep and then like be bothered by help defense. He's not going to take that shot even if he is left wide open because he wants to be in rhythm when he takes the shot, right? And I think that actually is kind of a good thing that he's just not going to force a shot that he's not comfortable taking. And it looks like he has the ability to catch a shot in rhythm and take a jumper, which that in of itself, it could be like a bit of a confidence booster if you do want to buy into the jumper long-term, because he has he feels comfortable taking a shot to a certain degree. Right. So there's that, but I'm not worried about it. What does kind of worry me, Maxwell, and since we're staying on offense right now, the passing numbers are very, very low. And I know some people are going to knock that.
He's got a microscopic assist rate. It's 4.7.
But he's not the only one out of all the bigs. And I have a whole list of names in my piece that's going to drop this upcoming week. He's not the only big who didn't pass the ball well in college and still found success in the NBA.
And I wouldn't even say that it's a case of him not passing the ball well. Like, it's just he's not just his role. Like, he just does not get the ball on the perimeter, like, ever, in terms of like all right, here's the set. Like, it is you orchestrating. So if we go
in the short roll, look, he can't pass it when he's catching the ball above the rim. You know what I mean? Like, that just wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah. So it's kind of tricky in that respect. And yeah, like the overall, like, it's like not something he's really asked to do. Which makes the eval a little tricky. Like, this is something we saw with Yves Missi last year to bring him back up. Like, he had a super low assist rate, but it was like, we're Baylor, we've got 90 guards, you just set screens and go to the basket. And like,
and he's rookie of the year candidate this year.
Yeah. And like with Yves, there was also like the fact that he at least got to like dribble a little bit and stuff. Like Maluach, like we don't even really get to see that. So in Vessel Africa League, though, it was 1 assist to 3.3 turnovers per game, but they played 9 games. The year before that, he played 10, and it was 0.8 to 1.2. So it's like the passing might be like okay, but we don't want to be like, this is going to be his strength. If the passing is good, then all of a sudden, like, we're in a really, really good spot. But I would share your concerns about just like the overall ball skill package as being like, well, if we're talking about like a really high offensive ceiling, that's probably something that's in the way.
And that's going to be what separates him from and we'll keep it Duke here, from the Derek Lively or the Mark Williams role in the NBA, where Derek Lively is taking threes like on occasion when he's not injured in the NBA. And the short roll playmaking was something that, as the season went on last year in Dallas, it was like, oh my gosh, like the ceiling on Lively is so high because he could be trusted to make these like dime passes to a PJ Washington in the corner or what have you, right? Like there's that ability for him to set a high screen, catch it just inside the 3-point line, and then look in the corner because he knows that someone's going to be open. I don't know if Maluach is going to be able to do that. And that, I think, is going to be another thing that limits him. But again, this is where the unicorns aren't real thing comes in, because there is still a third of the league where you don't have to do that to be successful in the NBA. And this is something that I feel like I wrote this article for myself, because as an evaluator, you look for strengths and weaknesses in a player. And like, if a big can shoot and can pass, like obviously the ceiling is going to be higher, but how good of the big man stuff that he's going to do on a possession by possession basis is that person? They're more than likely not going to be as good as Maluach is in that regard. And
Can
that's the sell, and it's
name,
not sexy.
On that same front, like, remember like right before the draft a few years ago when there was like a late Adama Sanogo push?
Yeah.
And it's just like, he's just a little too small. Like, you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, like Adama Sanogo will put up like 20 and 10s with the Windy City Bulls, but he's just like a little positionally small for the NBA. He's too below the rim. Like there's just not a really easy way for him to score when it's an NBA game. And like with Maluach, like there is. Like it's the easy way. So we'll move over to the defense now. I have like so there's the one gripe that I want to like give him some grace on, and then the other one where I'm like, this worries me. The one gripe where I'm like, let me maybe defend him a little bit, is like he gets knocked for his hands a lot. And like, I agree. Like, I feel like I've seen a lot of plays where it's like that ball came off the glass, he touched it a couple times and like just didn't really get a hold of it, or like it ended up being knocked out to the perimeter or whatever. I think there's a chance his hands are like 25 to 50% better than people make it out to be, because he does like not always do the best job positioning wise. And there's a lot of times where he is like really reaching out to get the ball, because his like placement when the ball comes off the rim is just not good. So then he's having to like maximize his wingspan and like try to get his grasp on it, and he can't. So I think that I feel like I don't see him bobble as many. Again, I'm going to go back to Misi. Like, I feel like Misi just bobbled a lot of balls last year that were like really easy for him to reel in. Where with Maluach, it feels like a lot of the ones that I see him lose, I'm like, I kind of understand why you lost that. And I feel like if your positioning had been better, maybe that would not have been the case. So with Maluach, I want to give him a little bit of grace to the hands. Where he drives me nuts is he goaltends like every single game. And I don't know if that is he's slow off the floor, which I think is part of it. But the one that concerns me, honestly, more than that, because like an NBA team can work on that, is he just have like broken shot blocking timing. So he's got a 6.4 block rate, which is like a fine number for a big man, but it's like below where you would hope someone with his measurements are.
It's like half of the average of the players that I put out in my article, right? Like I'm talking like Zach Edey. It is like Mark Williams, median. Derek Lively. Yeah, all those guys.
For guys who stick in the NBA. So it is like true, like almost true median, like big man block rate. But for his size, I feel like it should be better. And I don't know if the goaltending thing is just he doesn't know when to jump, or if it's, oh no, he does. He's just a little heavy off the floor. But either way, it's like, well, then your timing is wrong anyway. What do you make of like his overall like rim protection, I guess? Because I feel like it's good. Like I feel like it's good in the sense that he's like a big deterrent. He can like really pinpoint the ball, like you mentioned. Like he does a really good job. Like just one of those guys that takes up so much space that it's really hard to score around him at the rim. He forces pass outs. Like he's just imposing around the basket. And because he's so big too, like I think he's going to get to a point where he holds up well against drivers when they go into his chest. And when he stays like grounded, I think he does a good job, but like he just leaves his feet all the time. Timing when he leaves his feet isn't good. And that's where I'm kind of like, could this be a Mark Williams situation where like the idea of him is like, oh yeah, he's like this like really big guy. And then he ends up being way more offensively tilted than you might have expected.
That's where I'm leaning. I'm leaning he is going to be an offensively tilted big with the potential of growing into a more defensively refined big man. And again, I remind myself all the time, and in this article that I'm writing, like you got to remember that the kid's only been playing, or young man has only been playing basketball for 5 years. Like, and he is grown. And something about, and this might sound super simplistic, but defense, you're moving backwards as opposed to offense, right? A lot of the time, you're either moving side to side or you're moving backwards. You're not running forward on defense. And I think that's why he doesn't look as athletic on defense as he does on the offensive side. Because on offense, you're getting like his full frame body weight momentum like coming at you while you're on your heels, and he can feast on you. On the other side of the ball, I still think that he's learning defensive fundamentals. Like I can't tell you, Maxwell, how many times like I was watching film and he would play a guard like center. And I'm like, brother, you can't do that. Like you got to force them with your frame. You got to force them a direction and then use your frame and length to shut the door as soon as they're trying to walk inside, right? Like that's what you have to do. And he gives them the option to go to whatever they want. And if he's fronting them like dead center, he's susceptible to them driving to either side or getting him on his heels and then hitting a step back and shooting over the top of him. Like I was watching one game in particular, they were playing Pittsburgh and Ishmael Legic just like cooked him on a couple of drives. And I'm just like, you're going to face so many tougher guards, like, and you are going to have to switch out on guards on occasion or wings or forwards that can do at least the same things that Leggett can do for Pittsburgh. And you can't front someone like that. And in the post, I'm kind of worried because he is kind of jumpy. And
I think that's like okay though. Like that to me is something where it's like they can just get you to stay grounded. And when you're that big, I think you can afford to.
I just think that at this point, I would hope that from the beginning of the year to here, it would have like taken strides to be better. And I just don't think that it has. Like we'll talk about Maxime Raynaud here soon. Raynaud, because he is so versatile and where he can get shots from, he just like made Maluach uncomfortable pretty much the entire game, even though Maluach had his best offensive game that game. Defensively, Raynaud was able to kind of like, oh, you got to respect me as a 3-point shooter, so I'm going to up fake while you're recovering to me and then blow right past you and throw down a dunk. Okay, I'm in the mid post now. I'm just going to rise up and shoot because you're worried about my pump fake, right? Or, like he knows how to bait him into doing things, kind of like a Maxi Kleber style of big. And I'm just like, you gotta know the scouting report. You gotta know that this player wants to drive, and you gotta know how to close. Like when he closes out to a Raynaud, he completely sold out. Like he didn't even give himself a chance to be in like a recovery position. And that's the type of stuff that worries me. But again, that's why you got to remind yourself that he's only 18 years old, that he has only been playing competitive basketball for 5 years. And he is still very, very good in areas where it still matters. And you got to hope that the defensive fundamentals, the footwork, help you out. And I text you this on the side that it's such a gift for Duke to have Cooper Flagg play like the SGA role defensively, where he can just kind of roam and punish defenses, because defensive numbers can be deceiving on any like sort of statistical outlet. But on Synergy, if you look at where he's graded on post defense, like I can't tell you how many misses that he's credited with are because Cooper Flagg came over and like gave him an extra layer of security around the rim. And like that's what has me worried, is like he's got to rely on help as a big man so much that depending on where he goes, he's just not going to get that type of assistance.
Yeah, I think where I'm optimistic there, and I agree with your perimeter defense point. Like I feel like one of the things I'd most is he's like, he just gets suckered a lot. Like if you just throw counters at him, like he just sells out on like whatever the first thing he sees is too much of the time. I think a lot of this is just low hanging fruit, though. You know what I mean? Like it's like the dimension, like the physical dimensions are just like so great that it's like, yeah, it's like a small tweak, and like the character stuff is reported like really positive with him. So it's like, yeah, if you just work on this stuff with him, you can talk yourself into it coming around. So I have Maluach like 6th on my board right now. So I'm a fan. Like I think there's an undeniability to the offense and the size. And I think you just hope that like the low hanging fruit stuff comes along. And then, hey, if he shoots it, like awesome bonus high ceiling stuff.
I think that even though I'm like kind of lower on the defense, there are flashes of him flipping his hips and recovering and contesting shots. I include those in my article as well. Like there's enough to where you can buy in to where like if he does have a ceiling, to me, Maxwell, it's on defense. It's not on offense. And I have him, my latest board submission, I have him 13th. Okay. That's probably too low, but I don't know if I can get him 6, but I could probably get him in like that 8 to like 7, 8, 9, 10 range, like something.
And I think that's like part of my thing is like 6 through 14. I'm like way down on this year. Like I adore my top 5, and after that, I'm like, these guys are all terrible. No, I'm just kidding.
I got like Neek Clifford 10
with those guys. Sure, yeah, like that. Like that's my thing.
And I love Neek. Yeah,
I do too. I actually, for No Students Plus subscribers, you're gonna get a lot of words on Neek Clifford tomorrow in my column. So make sure you're checking that out. But yeah, I just have a lot of doubts about those guys, and I feel like Maluach feels like both the surest thing and the guy with the most low hanging fruit in that group to me.
And he's the type of player that I have historically been way lower than what like a redraft or even an actual draft would prove otherwise. And like that, I'm trying to refine my evaluation of his archetype of a big man, because it's not sexy, but it's proven and it's valuable.
Yeah. And that's what evaluation and scouting and learning is all about. So we're going to do a quick break. We're going to talk about a very different type of big man right after the break. Stick with us. We are now going to discuss Georgetown's Thomas Sorber. So Sorber is a guy that I wrote about earlier in the year. So I'm going to lay back a little bit on this segment here. Sorber is a freshman, sort of surprise prospect. He was 40th in the RSCI 100. Surprise, one and done potential guy. He's averaging 14.5 points per game, 8.5 rebounds. The passing skill is a big thing with him. He's averaging 2.4 assists to 2.3 turnovers, really high assist numbers for a big man of any variety, but especially a freshman. Also, the defensive production, 1.5 steals per game to 2 blocks per game. 53.2% from the field. He is 16.2% from three, but he takes 1.5 per game, and he is a 72.4% free throw shooter. Sorber is sort of an analytics darling, a guy that like the numbers tell you is going to be a successful NBA player. Ultimately, still just a guy that confuses me a little bit because like the size is a little bit less than ideal. The game tape just looks a little funky, and it's like, what do I trust here? Like I my gut tells me generally just like to trust the numbers. But certainly just a confusing and odd evaluation in a sense, but a guy that I ultimately really like. So what are your thoughts on Sorber? And I'll throw out the classic, like, what's your prospect journey been with Thomas Sorber? Because he's a surprise player.
Yeah, he was a player that I was eyeing coming into the year just because he's funky. And, Maxwell, you and I are both big funk guys. We love the funk around
Especially
here.
The bigs. Yeah, funky bigs.
Very funkadelic bigs. Yeah, we love it. He reminds me of like that late 90s, early 2000s power forward type of a player, right? Like when I think about, man, what would Antonio McDyess look like in the NBA today, or a player like that? I think that he is probably anybody in the chat. First off, thanks to everybody for coming and hanging out. The chat is live right now. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us. And shout out to y'all if y'all remember who Antonio McDyess was. But he's just super skilled, man. Like good size, not great size, but good size. Can literally do everything and does it all efficiently. Like I watched his most recent games and I'm just like, brother, you were just so like, you were too good. You're so good already. I love the rebounding. I love the footwork in the paint. I think that he's incredibly polished for his age. I think that the screen setting is right there. He's only going to get stronger. I think that the pick and roll stuff with him is very real. I think the short roll potential with him is very real. Maxwell, like the defense is there. I think that he would do well to. I mean, this is going to be like a no duh statement, right? But just humor me. He's going to do very well if like he can go to a team that's got like some really solid wing defense to kind of help him out. Because I don't know if he's going to be like a rim deterrent. I think he'll be a good rim protector. I just don't think that people are going to be afraid to go at him.
I agree.
There's a difference, right, between the protector versus the deterrent. I think that he'll be a great rim protector. I don't know if people are going to be afraid of him. I think that there's a world where he could be the best big man in this class. We were talking about that coming in, and I'm not saying I feel the best about that, but I could definitely see a world where that shakes out. Maxwell, I want to ask you a question, and I mentioned this. I didn't even give you the name, but I told you that I wanted to ask you a type of question. I put this in the No Ceilings group chat too. Is he significantly better than what Jalen Smith out of Maryland was when he came out?
I think yes. I think twofold. I think it's first off, I think the strength is a big difference. We're like Jalen Smith's nickname was Sticks, just like he was so thin down low. And I think while I think part of what helped Jalen Smith, even though he did not technically provide value to his drafting team, and like it took him a little while to figure out, was that like he was always a really good jump shooter for a guy who was a big. I think with Sorber, there's a level of feel that just Jalen Smith did not have on both ends. The comp I've been kind of toying with is Wendell Carter.
Okay, I can see that.
Like the big bulky body, he's not going to be Mr. Bounce. I think the overall like defense, like the defensive profile is going to look similar, where it's a lot of like I am big and I'm strong, but I'm mostly outsmarting you and winning with my brain as opposed to like my physical tools. And you look at the situation he's in, where he's in Orlando, and there's like heaps of size and disruption around him between like the ferocity of Jalen Suggs, the length of Franz Wagner, the length of Paulo Banchero, the fact that you could like slot him alongside Goga or Mo Wagner. Like there's all these
Jonathan
different ways.
Isaac.
There's different like ways that you can sort of fit him into a successful defensive scheme. I would say my big concern with Sorber, and I would say too, like, I feel like I've been sleeping on him, like going back into the tape. I have a bad habit of like, I write about a guy and then like, because I think about him so much, I just sort of put him on the back burner for a while. So I didn't really go back into the tape a whole lot until this week, or I'd watch games and I'd like sort of be more paying attention to the guys on the other team than Sorber. I think the defense and movement appear better throughout the year. It's almost like he's played himself into shape. And it is worth noting, it looked like he went down, I believe, with a foot injury the other day. So we'll kind of see where that goes. Had a bad fall. Hopefully it's not something serious. But I just really buy the overall skill package, the passing, how well he can just whip the ball from the top of the key to players, the way that he can put the ball on the deck a little bit. I like that he's still shooting threes, even though he's not making them. I just think he has like a really great advanced view of the floor. And he also gets to the line a ton. He's really physical. Like anything you could ask for in terms of like mindset and approach you get out of Sorber. It's just the physical stuff, like we talked about, where it's like, is he going to be bouncy enough? Is he going to be long enough? Because that's the other thing with Wendell Carter is Wendell Carter measured with like a gigantic wingspan. I think he had like a 7'4" or 7'5" wingspan.
Yeah.
If Sorber doesn't have that, that's a much more complicated discussion that we're going to have. I would say offensively, my big concern is just like, where does he score? Like it's what we just talked about with Maluach, was it's like, well, like we're with Sorber, if the jump shot's not there, which Wendell Carter did have coming out, then it's a little bit dicey if you can't count on him to at least knock down like a mid-range shot, when he's probably not going to be a guy that you're just like tossing up lobs to. Like he just is a little bit heavy off the floor. 16 half-court dunks on the year, 22 total. Like there's on the lower side for a big man, even if you're like extrapolating to what that would be by the end of the season. So that's my concern, is just like, is it it's like if you watch the Suns, like when Oso Ighodaro has a bad game, it's just no threat of like, all right, well, I'm going to play off of you. And that makes it really hard for you to create an advantage at this level. And also like, you're just not really going to get anything otherwise. And at least Oso is like a little bouncy and has that nose for the offensive glass, where with Sorber, it's going to have to be a lot more the result of just his mental processing. So really interested. I think the offensive stuff is where I get a little murky. Like, how do you feel about his offensive projection?
I think the offense, he'll be used as like a dive man, pick and roll style, right? Which is going to make it hard because he is not that ultimate lob threat. But depending on how far back these pick and rolls are ran, you can trust him in the short roll. You can trust him like in that like little touch, float, push shot as well. Like as long as he's got something like that in his bag that he can rely on, like some sort of go-to in that intermediate stage, that will help him out a lot. Obviously he's just got a long way he can still go, like as a freshman player, right? Like he can still add some athletic power to his base, things like that, to where he could he can work himself into being in a little bit better shape. But I think he's going to be probably a 2-level scorer, to where trail big, maybe can hit the three. I know that the three is not like the most efficient thing in the world right now, but he has shown the desire to want to be able to add that to his game, and he has hit a little bit. And there's some other touch indicators that could give you a little bit of optimism. Ultimately, though, I think he's going to be around the basket, and that's where the evaluation is tricky, because he has the upside to be able to do a lot, but coming in, it's like he's going to have to. It's just hard, man.
These guys are tricky too, because I feel like if the G League had better bigs, I would feel better about him in a lot of different contexts. Because it's like, oh, you just like throw him in the G League and develop. And it's like, well, if he goes to the G League, he's going to like outsmart all of the bigs down there and also be like the same size as them. So like, it's not really, it's like what we talked about with Adama Sanogo, where like these numbers are really good in the G League because all the G League centers are built like Adama Sanogo. So he can just be better than them at that, where like, it's just tough because like then he goes to the NBA and it's like Zach Edey and Jokic and Miles Turner and guys where it's just like, you're not facing guys who are physically built like that in the G League. So it's like you're gonna have to get those reps in game, but is the offensive value going to be enough that a team can play you? it's a little tricky.
I think
love the
there's a
defense.
world. I'm sorry, just real quick offensively. Yeah. I think there's a world where he can be like that Şengün, so like Sabonis variant, like to a degree, to where he can be like have the offense flow through him at certain spots to where he can get his offense by DHO. I think that is like within the realm of possibility to where he can get like that intellectual big man offensive game.
The keeper force the switch off, like the stick your butt out. Okay, now the big took the bait, he switched, now you get the smaller guy sort of like semi-hostage, plow through him, like that sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that is definitely within the realm of possibility with him.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I feel like I've been back to like inadvertently sleeping on him before we talk about him. And I think a lot of that's the defense. I think he's moving really well out there. Unreal hands defensively, like so good, getting his hands into pockets out of like ball screens, like really good at just timing, like super fast reaction time. Like when plays break down, he thrives in gray areas. Absolutely adore the hands. Super high steal rate for a big man. 2.7 steal rate is like elite by big man standards. Always pointing, always communicating. Super strong, stays vertical inside. Really knows how and when to rotate. I like his discipline a lot more than a lot of the other bigs in this class as far as like staying grounded, staying out of foul trouble. His anticipation's really good. I think a lot of the concerns are just kind of the stuff we talked about earlier. Like the recovery tools aren't great. He doesn't get up that well. Can be a little slow, like getting up and down the court. I feel like that got better throughout the year. Ground coverage, not always the fastest. Like those are the issues. But I think as you invest in him and maximize his fitness, some of that gets a little better. I just like what you talked about. Like I don't think he's ever a true rim deterrent at the 5. But I think on an island, the combination of his instincts, feet, hands, like he's going to be in a really good spot. I think he's going to be a good defender at the next level.
Yeah, he's got really good anticipation, and that's what I like about him, right? And I think that because the measurables don't appear to be monstrous, like he wins with his brain, kind of like how we've talked about Derek Queen almost in a way, right? To where Derek Queen, another big man who is not the biggest nor like the most athletically imposing, he just wins with his brain. Like Thomas Sorber to a large degree plays that same way. I trust the mobility on the defensive side, and kind of like what we were like how I was almost making excuses for Maluach is like young to the game. It's harder on defense because you're moving side to side and backwards as opposed to moving forward. Like that doesn't seem to bother Sorber at all, right? Like he is totally fine. I trust him to kind of like show and recover on defense a lot more, to where depending on what the pick and roll defense is going to be on any given night for whatever team he goes to, I trust him to like show the ball handler on the switch, like have them like hesitate and then recover back to his man while the ball handler's original defender goes back to regain and reestablish position on him. I think that Sorber could do well in a system like that. I think that the help instincts are there. I think the rebounding is just phenomenal. Like this dude just eats the glass like nobody's business, right? And I like his outlet passing. It's kind of a niche thing too. Like whenever there is like a forced miss or turnover, like he can get the break pumping and like in a hurry. The athleticism is going to, like you touched on a lot of like the similar things. Like his evaluation, I feel like is going to be kind of simple on both ends of the floor. It's just because the defense is very there, but it's like, what is he going to look like when he's going up against NBA size bigs with NBA big athleticism, speed, and length that he's going to have to deal with as opposed to what he's dealing with right now.
Yeah, I think he's like one of the big measurement guys in this class. Like, I think if he measures really long,
that's true.
It's like I'm going to feel phenomenal about him. And if it's like really dicey, like if he's somehow, and like to be like 100% transparent, I have no idea what the measurements are. But if it's like I'm trying to think of like bigs if he's really short in recent years. But if it's like a bizarre, like, oh no, he's like 6'8" with a 6'10" wingspan. Like if it's one of those, it's going to be like, oh
yeah.
Like
I was gonna ask like +3, like that's not instilling a bunch of confidence. But if he's like +5,
yeah,
like then it's then okay, like I can buy that.
Yeah, like as the example I was seeing was remember KJ Williams at LSU, like when he was kind of like a stretch big, like block shots, and like he went to Portsmouth, and it's like, oh, he's like sub 6'8" with like a 6'10" or 6'11" wingspan. It was like, there goes that idea. Like I kind of like
It
that
gives
guy.
you the ick.
Yeah. So let's move on to Maxime Raynaud. He is sort of the belle of the ball, it feels like to me right now, and like I don't know, like. This is one of like my things I'm trying to work through as an evaluator. I feel like when guys like come on really strong, that we're sort of fringy guys, I try not to get like a bug up my butt about like, I actually watched him a lot. I think he's not that good. Like I try not to like toot my own horn too much and like open up my mind and be like, okay, well, what are other people seeing? I am having a hard time getting there with Reno. Like I know like a lot of people in our group love him and like have him top 30. Like I was texting with Nathan about him the other day. I just struggle with him. So he's 7'1", 250, really productive, like super productive. He is at Stanford. On the year, he is averaging almost 20-10. Yeah, 19.9 points per game, 11.3 rebounds, 1.7 assists to 2.3 turnovers, 1 steal, 1 block, 46.8% from the field, 32.6% from three, but on 5.4 attempts per game, which is a ton for a big man, and 78% at the free throw line. Really good at rebounding and scoring the basketball, like you said earlier, just in a variety of areas. I have just sort of my doubts about like the overall NBA translation, but I know that you just saw him in person, so I want you to kind of lead the way on this one. What are your overall thoughts on Raynaud, and what did you see out of him in person?
It's really weird because I spoke on how he just recently made Maluach look kind of silly on defense a bunch, right? But a couple of nights before that, when I watched him play against Georgia Tech, Ibrahim Soare, who is a redshirt freshman, like not a super big man for Georgia Tech, like drew the Maxime Raynaud assignment and just irritated the mess out of him. Now, Georgia Tech also doubled Maxime to some degree. Like it wasn't like an every possession basis, but it was enough to get under his skin. And when I saw him against Soare, I'm like, okay, like Soare is long, he's active, he's a good athlete. I could buy him getting under his skin a little bit. Then when Soare went to the bench, Duncan Powell, who Maxwell, you and I, had many conversations. We talked about him coming out of Sacramento State. He's listed at about 6'8", 235 pounds.
Yeah.
And Raynaud did not know what to do against Duncan Powell. And he is talking about Raynaud, he is a senior. He is not like a younger prospect, right? I think that he comes into the NBA with like a severe strength deficit. Like he's listed at the size that he is, but he's like one of those like t-shirt and long socks guys. Like you don't get a real good chance to see his body, right? And I saw him up person and I'm like, he's every bit as tall as he's listed as, but I don't know if I buy 250. And if he is 250, it's not like a sturdy 250. Like he could not establish position. Like he could not move Powell where he wanted to go. And that was troubling to see. But what he does have, Maxwell, is ball skill.
Yeah.
And that's sexy, but how much is an NBA team going to lean into that? And this is where you can kind of get into some Quentin Post discussion where you and I both liked Post last year. I had a chance to talk to Post. I wrote about him. Like there was a lot that I liked about him, and a lot of it was the ball skill. If you look at what Post is doing now for Golden State, and he's actually getting like significant burn for a team that is
playing, just got a real contract, standard contract too.
Exactly. Post is doing some of the things that he did really well in college, namely shoot. He is not handling the ball. He is not driving to the paint, even though he could do that in college, like really well. He's not doing that. And if Golden State, who needs a big man and who needs they needed some help,
a secondary playmaker, which is why they just acquired Jimmy Butler. Like there was playmaking reps for the taking.
Exactly. They didn't lean into Post. I don't know how much an NBA team and Golden State is not like a traditional offense towards like heavy pick and roll, right? Like they rely on like playmaking from everybody, right? Like they rely on ball skill from everybody. And Post it hasn't done a lot of that. I don't know how much Maxime Raynaud is going to do if he doesn't even go to like the odds of him going to a team similar to a Golden State are very slim because Golden State's like one of a kind.
Yeah.
I don't know how much Raynaud is going to lean into the stuff that like separates him from college bigs right now in the NBA. And that's kind of like the proposition that scares me a little bit. I have him as like a early to mid second round guy. But he just went in the most recent mock draft on no ceilings, like 25. And like, that's not an oddity or a rarity among the draft community. There's a bunch of people that like him, like in that range. Like, if the shooting is a skill set that you're going to hang your hat on, like I'd like you to shoot better than 32%, even though the volume is good.
And that's the thing too, is it's also like, is he taking this many shots because like he's a shooter, or is it just like Stanford needs a guy to take those shots? Like, I don't know. It may maybe it's a little bit of both, but like, I don't know. I don't totally buy the shot. I don't like how the shot looks either. Like, I feel like it is kind of hitchy. Not that, every shot I select perfect, but if it looked more comfortable, I'd be a little bit more convinced of it.
I like the shot mechanics. Like I watch it up close, like it.
Okay.
And I don't want to be like, I'm not like how you said earlier, I'm not like tooting my own horn. Like I'll watch him in person. I'm smarter than everybody else. Right. But like, I watched him like get shots up and he was like pretty fluid with the handle, like shooting off the bounce. Like it wasn't just like a training staff person, like threw him the ball and he shot off the catch. Like the shooting doesn't bother me. It's just that, like I said, if that's going to be what you hang your hat on, then brother, like 32% ain't it,
Yeah. So and like I like his inside touch a lot. Like he's got that like really soft baby hook. He can use both hands around the rim. And I think he generally does a pretty good job of attacking closeouts. Like he's got those big long strides. He's pretty smooth with the ball. Like he gets up like a little better than you might think. Sneaky athletic, that Maxime Raynaud.
Yeah.
Like when he goes downhill. And I think like the other thing too is like the floor vision can be really clever. Like the reason the assist to turnover ratio is underwater is he does get way too much dip on his chip at times. But I think for the most part, there is like a real creativity and flair. There was the game against Santa Clara earlier this year where like he threw behind the back in transition and then did not get an assist for it because the dude like blew the layup or bobble. Like I don't remember what it was, but like I just remember like that plays burned into my brain because I was like, how many bigs that are 7-1 are like throwing a behind the back pass in transition, and it's a good pass. And like he can make those like cross court whips. I love that, and I also think he does a good job of not being like, I don't know, you know how on some of these teams that aren't as competitive, you feel like the weight of the guy on the team being like, I'm our only good player, so like I've got to have the ball all the time. Like I do feel like he does a good job of still being within the flow of the team's offense.
Yes.
And not feeling like, oh, like it's Maxime Raynaud time. So like those are the positives. I think it's just that it's I don't know that I buy the shot totally. And I also think that when he plays real centers, he just has a much harder time getting to his spots. Whether that's
he didn't guard Dongo. He didn't guard Yongo like at the game against Georgia Tech. And that to me was like, is that like because they want you roaming over and helping? Or is that because you just can't hang? And Jongo is like 6'9", like 230, 235, something like that. But he has a hot motor. I don't know that Raynaud has like that hot of a motor. And that's not like a European thing, right? That's like I saw him just like stop like on plays, and that was not very fun to see in person.
Yeah. So like that's my thing. It's like if offensively you're sort of struggling to attain position consistently, if it's going to be harder for you to draw closeouts, you can't attack them as well because you're easily bumped off your line. Like all this stuff, like I just feel like it's a real Jenga tower, like offensively, as far as the value proposition, where it's like you take out like one or two pieces and the thing just kind of topples over. And I think that's
a good
where
way to look at it, yeah.
I'm a little more concerned. And then defensively, like just a really low block rate guy. You see the strength again against drivers. Like guys can just kind of drive right into his chest. I think he leaves his feet too easily. I think he gets out of position in ball screens at times. He does not have good recovery tools. really high effort on the glass. And like, I think there's times where he shows discipline. I think there's times where he uses his length and angles well enough in drop to keep guys away from getting good looks inside. I think he gets off the floor well. I like guys who could jump out of their slide well, which I think is something that he can do. He's like pretty light on his feet, but it's also like just the classic, like, okay, well, if he's a switch guy, like, is he still switching in the NBA? And if he's in drop, like, he just gives up too much easy stuff. Like, and he's a little too easy to get through. So for me, like, it just all feels like if he was just like 10% better at everything, I would love him. And he's not that. And that makes me view him more as a guy that it's like, okay, yeah, you can give him a two-way and see if it pans out or not. But like, I'm not rushing to give him like a standard deal.
I can tell you, watching Georgia Tech, and I got a chance to talk to Nathan George, a player that you and I both like a good deal. Mm-hmm. He's going to be a guy, I think, like long-term, like all you listeners and viewers out there, file that name away. Like, he's at least going to be interesting moving forward. I was talking to him specifically about the pick and roll synergy that he and Django had, because it was just like, they forced it down Stanford's throat like all game. And George, like, when he had Raynaud on him, he would like either go right up to him and like lay up over and around him, or he would leverage the threat of him putting pressure on the rim and hit a step back over him, or like pull up and hit a midi. Like, and that's Nathan George. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We both like Nathan George, but I don't know
if he can be college guard who's not super athletic. Like, that's ultimately where it stands. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a crafty guard, but he's not very bursty. Mm-hmm. And there was just like, he made I think he had like one steal and one block, but it wasn't like him imposing anything. It was just kind of like an I'm big block and a I'm long steal in a passing lane, you know, or an entry pass. So I don't know. Like, I don't want to put too much stock into watching one game live because, again, he made Khaman Maluach look really silly in their most recent game, and kind of gives you that assurance that, like, yeah, as like an early second round flyer, sure, yeah, I'll take him. I'll take a guy who is that big, who can shoot, who can rebound like crazy, who sets really good screens. Like, one thing that stood out to me in person is that when he's in a DHO set, Maxwell, like the lanes that he paves are just, they're ginormous. Like, he is very good within that type of an offense. I just don't know if I'm ready to invest like late first round capital. But we were talking about this too, Maxwell, like our back half of the first round, like, to me, it's an etch a sketch. Like, I write down names and I just shake it up and throw it out. And like, who else can I put here? You know, like, I wouldn't be upset with it. He's just not the type of player that I think would give me whatever sort of upside that some other players in the draft would be able to, like that late in the draft.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where I'm at too. I feel like there's just other center bets. There's a lot of there's a good chance that there's like a ton of centers in this draft, and I just like those guys more. You know what I mean? It's like I feel better about Chennai Broom. I feel better about Thomas Lavivicic. Like, there's just a lot of guys in that range that I just feel a little bit better about. So, that's where I'm at with him. But again, this is going to sound so rudimentary. I feel like if you look at guys that just like post huge counting numbers, a lot of times they just like end up being all right. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, like there's a reason that like Mobo and AJ Mitchell, like some of those guys are just like able to play. And it's like, oh yeah, like it turns out if you average like 20 and 10 in college, like you generally end up just like not being bad at basketball. So I think that's,
or if you're in
-3 too, is it's like, if he was in a friendlier team context and the passing is simplified a little bit, and then maybe the usage is lower, so then maybe he's able to exert a little bit more defensively, does that look different? And I think that's like a really fair thing to keep in mind with him.
Yeah, I was just going to say that same thing. Like, if he's not the only offensive threat, then like maybe the 3-point shot looks better. If he's got like a reliable point guard setting him up, then yeah, maybe it looks better, as opposed to, okay, you're either posting up or standing on the wing. There's not like any sort of creative angles. So could be a little bit too harsh on the eval based on team construct alone.
Yeah. So we're going to take a break. We're going to get to some sleepers. Stick with us. All right, it is time for the Sicko session. Let's do Viktor Lakhin first. Stone guy. He is now at Clemson after spending, I believe, 3 seasons at Cincinnati. Yep, 3. He's an older guy. He's a redshirt senior. But man, talk about production. 11 points per game for Lakhin this year. 50.2% from the field, 40.4% from 3 on nearly 2 a game, 70% at the free throw line, 6.1 rebounds per game, 1.4 assists, and then the defense. My goodness, 1.8 blocks, 1.0 steals per game. Very long, very impactful. What made you want to talk about Viktor Lakhin this week?
Because he's good, man. Like that's really like the base of it. And again, to stick with our theme of rudimentary, with the Big Man podcast today, like I had him like in my 80s. I'm like, he is significantly better than so many players above. Like, am I just knocking him because of his age group, or am I just knocking him because I don't watch like a ton of Clemson? But like when you go back and just watch him, he's just so smart, man. Like he is incredibly intelligent and he's incredibly productive. I mean, he scores in a variety of ways. Like the confidence in the 3-pointer this year, dude, is just insane. He has just ramped it up to a whole nother level, to the point to where like on the efficiency and volume now, like you kind of buy that the guy is going to be able to shoot at the next level, but he still does all the important big man things. Like he's a pretty good rebounder, and Clemson plays him and the chef like next to each other. So they're splitting rebounding duties, right? And they got some senior laden guards on this team that like to grab and go on the glass as well. So he's like boxing out for those guards as well, right? The shot blocking timing. I mean, you're looking at block. You look at the profile and then you're like, okay, like he might be good at defense. Then you're like 9.5 block percent is like, what? Like that's insane. That is like,
it's
he's
worth
laughing Maluach.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where it's like if you're looking at the block rates and you're like, oh, well, why are the block rates so high this year? It's because Cincinnati, he always like played alongside another big. Like he was either in a switching screen or it was like it's him and Bediago or whatever. Like there's always been, like I say this as someone who's like watched him intently for several years. Like there's always been something else or like some reason that block rate's either been a little bit lower. Like whether it's just scheme had him out on the perimeter more, or last year it was him and Aziz, and that's why it went down to 3.9. Like there's reasons for it, and he's always been super disruptive as a defender. Like this is the first time he just kind of gets to stay home and be that anchor on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and he's got a 2.6 steals percentage too to go along with it. Like this dude is just active on the defensive side. Now he's a little bit below the basket of an offensive player, which I think that's why you're going to get some limitations put on him. Like obviously, like redshirt senior, he's going to be capped, right? And then you look at the fact that he's not like a hyper athlete, it's going to be capped. But he's so smart, he's so strong, like deceptively strong for his listed measurements. Like he plays hard as heck, right? He's got that floor spacing ability, which I just think is just fantastic. He's got good touch around the rim. He can make some really tough passes as well, man. Like we're talking about how Sorber can be used in the short roll. Like Lakhin probably doesn't have the promise of a Sorber, but I think he's got such a higher floor. Like he's going to have like an inherent trust. And I talked earlier, Maxwell, about like a Maxi Kleba. Like Viktor Lakhin could legit come in and be like that type of big man to where you could trust him to be able to make plays and finish plays from so many different spots while still being like a valuable defender with a little bit of switching ability, dare I say. Like I like his footwork a lot.
I kind of like him in a switching scheme, like talking.
I do too.
Just because like the lack of balance and stuff. It's like, I think that's probably what's best for him there. And I think he just guards really well on the perimeter. Like he just really swallows dudes up. His ground coverage is really good. So it's like one of those things too, where it's like, if he's got to make rotations, like he's up to that. I really like that. I think my gripe with Lakhin has always been like, it just feels a little up and down all the time. Like I feel like it's one of those things where it's like a couple weeks the shot will go in and then it'll stop going in. And then he'll have some good passing games and then he just won't pass as well for a while. Like I feel like anytime I check in with him, I'm surprised at what the numbers are. And it's either positive or negative. Sometimes it's like, oh man, like really turning it over a lot more this year. And then like a couple weeks later, it's like, oh, the assists are up. And then like, oh, the 3 is falling again. Like it just, if he was a more consistent offensive player, I think I'd be a lot more sold. But it just feels like both the field and the shot have been so up and down that like, I can't totally trust it.
That has been where I've been historically, But going back and giving him another like this is my second look on Lakhin for the year. I think he has like Maxwell on a 26 usage percentage, BPM of over 7. Like,
yeah,
that's not nothing. You know what I mean? Like, and that
like
speaks to consistency. And just real quick too, like he's had 6 games with 3 or more blocks, man. Like he's showing that level of consistency on a high major team still. And I think people are sleeping on him to a degree. Like, and by people, I throw myself into that too, where like I thought, okay, you're skilled. I've seen it, you know, you're nice, like maybe Portsmouth guy or whatever. But like going back and giving him another dedicated look, I'm actually surprised to, at least in my opinion, what I thought the consistency was to where it's proving to be this year.
Yeah. I'm growing on him. I think year over year, like he was the guy I did for No Stone, and I was like just kind of skeptical of, because I think 2 years ago, a lot of this stuff was like even more theoretical. Like he legit never passed 2 years ago. Like when he was a sophomore, like he honestly got just like, if he got the ball, it was going up. Like I didn't say it in such words at the time, but like he was like one of the more selfish players I'd watched. Whereas it's like if he gets the ball on the block, it's like that is going to be a touch shot, and it is probably not going in because his touch isn't that good. But like, boy, can he play defense? And now it's like you got that defensive production. You get much more consistent passing, like solid passing as a whole, I would say, for a big man. And then, the threat of the 3 ball, like we're working with something here. Like there is something that is very potentially real with Viktor Lakhin that was for sure not the case 2 years ago. And even last year felt a lot more theoretical than what we see now in this true role, where he kind of gets to like be the anchor, because like as good as a rebounder as Shefflin is, like he's not going to hold down the fort at the center spot.
Nope.
Like you've always needed to play him with another dude for that reason. And like Lakhin's proving that like if he can be that guy now.
Yeah. And again, I look at the production to your point, like last year, he was like, if you squint, you can see it. This year, like he's just like your eyes are open and now they're wide, because
it's it's actually possible. Yeah.
He pops this year. And that's something that he hasn't historically done. And again, I'm talking about from like 25 on as an Etch a Sketch, like, and then considering how many freshmen are like okay but not great this year, would not be surprised at all if you're seeing this guy as like a early to mid second round pick this year, just based on production and activity alone.
Yeah. Let's move over to Rafael Castro. This is a guy that I'm looking at for No Stone potentially. He is a 6'10" redshirt junior at George Washington. Super productive, 7.7 BPM on the year. What I watched a game against VCU this week, and I just like loved what I saw. So he's been super efficient this year. He dunks everything. Like he's like towards the top of the dunks leaderboard. Really, really bouncy dude at 6'10". Super skinny. Like he's like listed at 215. Like when we get to the Knox, like it's going to be the way. This dude's real thin, but he's really tough. Like on both sides of the floor, like it feels like he's always fighting for positioning. Like he doesn't have a problem through contact. Like for everything you could want out of a skinny big man, he does. Like really flies in on the offensive glass. Great lob target, but also awesome passer. Like has some short roll stuff to him. Can make those cross court swings facing up. Like reads the last level of help well when he goes downhill, like in a roll setting. Like if someone else rotates over, he can make the pass after that to get out of it. Between the pure combination of just like, man, this guy can really dunk and he can really pass. Like that's a really great, in the offensive rebounds and screens. Like that's a great offensive skills package. And then defensively, like solid defensive rebounder, another guy who gets a ton of steals, bouncy around the basket, very comfortable on the perimeter, another guy who covers ground well. Like it just feels like this is one of the more interesting center sleepers that's out there. I just love everything about this guy's game. Like really, and like another high steal center, like gets hands into pockets and passing lanes, like can meet guys above the rim. I just feel like this is where the modern big man is going, where it's like the classic, like rim runner defender archetype, but just updated for a new age, where it's like, he's going to be comfortable guarding in a 5-out system. He's got the ball skills that you can at least go 4.5 out on offense, because you can put him at the elbow or at the nail or have him up on the high post. And like, if a defender creeps up too far, he can turn and go and like do a handoff keeper and get downhill and dunk that way. Like there's just a lot I like about his game. I do worry about the fact he's really skinny. And then I'm also leery of like the transfer down success stories all the times where it's like, I was at Providence, didn't really play there for 2 years. Like, what's the deal with that? I don't know. Like, that's something I'd have to dig on. But guy who dunks a lot with really high field, who can like move and make stuff happen on defense, sign me up.
Yeah, I feel better about him as like a transfer down guy. It's funny you bring that up because you look at the success of like a Drew Pember in college, right? Like transfer down guy. Was scrawny, but he played like that. And it's funny because Castro, it was like you're reading my notes, and this is like where I know that you and I are like-minded in some ways. I'm like, he is pretty thin, but like he is very aggressive. Like he puts a ton of pressure on that rim, and it's not just above the rim pressure either. It's like, I got it, I'm diving, and I am still like, I'm going to try to push through you. Like, and it doesn't matter the measurements of the opposing big. He plays the same way every time, and he's still pretty efficient at it, which gives me a lot of hope that when maybe he does put on another 10-ish pound, like 8 to 10 pounds, something like that, to where you're like, okay, he still is athletic enough to like be dangerous in a bunch of different areas. He does have great ball skill, passing feel, stuff like that, to where it doesn't inhibit that, dynamic ability that he has, but it just makes that relentlessness to the rim all that much more dangerous for him. It's incredible to see. The passing stuff I like a lot. I also like that despite being thin, he sets a ton of screens, a ton of screens. And it's not just like ball screens, it's down screens, pin downs, UCL. Like, he is involved in so many different type of actions to where they don't succeed if he's not screening. And he's not just like in the way, he's like screening. And again, when he adds, maybe that like 7 to 10 pounds of like strength and muscle, it's just going to make him much more effective. I like him a lot. He was a guy that showed on a bunch of queries and like just box score surfing that I do, and was on my watch list. And when we were talking about doing bigs, you brought him up. I was at first surprised because I'm like, can this guy like be a forward? Like, is that outside of the realm of possibilities that he's not just be a 5, but like with the way that some NBA teams run offense, like, Maxwell, I don't think it's crazy that he could be a 4 depending on the team that he goes to.
Yeah, I think you could definitely play him alongside another big if that big shoots. Because I like free throw percentage wise, like, this is a guy that doesn't take threes and is like okay free throw shooter for a big, like 63%.
Yeah.
So it's like he's not going to be the one that shoots it. But if you play him alongside like Kelly Olynyk, Miles Turner, like some of these guys, it's like, all right, there are lineups where all of a sudden this makes sense, where you could like sort of go big without having to like sacrifice a whole lot. I think that could certainly be a possibility. Yeah, I think that's on the table. I think it would, I could see him being really beneficial in that role with certain teams too.
Yeah, because he's got good size, he's got good length and positional quickness.
And ball skills are there too. So it's not like
the ball skill is what separates it.
We've got a big man that can only shoot and a big man that can like only stand under the basket. Like, he can, like, the fact that you can actually put it on the deck a little bit, do some passing. It like doesn't totally make your offense super clunky to go 2 bigs with him out there.
Yeah, you do some cool high-low stuff, Like, I think that would be fun. But I like him a lot. I'm glad that we got to talk about him on today's show. Another eval that I got to do. And I think that you got something. And normally when you're like, yeah, this guy might be a no stones guy, I'm like, okay, this guy's got some juice then. Like, he's got to have something to his game if Maxwell is eyeing him for that list.
Yeah, like I sent you like the super tentative list a while ago, and he was like sort of on that like bubble, and then I like moved him up to like, okay, he's got to like actually be in the mix, because I think he's just quite a bit better than some of the guys that I was a little like, maybe this guy, and it's like, nah, I think he's just like hands down more interesting. So,
and that just speaks to like his aggressiveness, like
that was what won me over.
Yep.
Yeah, I think he's just very, like your point, like very tough, always kind of fighting for spots.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the separator for me, especially again with the measurements. Like, you gotta have intensity, you gotta be a high motor, always on motor type of guy.
For sure. So I think that's going to do it for this week's show. Stephen, you've got that Maluach piece that I'm very, very excited to read. I know we talked about him quite a bit, but like you said, like, you just kept being like, there's more in the article about this, there's more in the article about that. So I can't wait to read it. Anything else you're kind of cooking up in No Ceilings this week?
Yeah, I was actually able to speak to Jamil Telfort for Butler. I had the pleasure of getting to speak to him. Did a phone interview to where I can include excerpts from that interview to written work. So Maluach speech is done. It's up to our editors for review. I'm going to go to work on this Telfort piece and get that up. So you're going to get a double dose of Stephen this week. And I've been high on Telfort this year. I think that he could be like a second round guy. I just think that he's got the measurements, the intangibles, like speaking to him and like getting his understanding of like the game, like why he makes the decisions that he makes, and getting to know him a little bit more. It makes me that much bigger of a fan. So I'm excited to get to share some of that insight with the readers as well.
I'm excited too, because you've been all about Telfort for a while. So anytime like you can see, it's like, man, I know Stephen's gonna write the heck out of this piece, and to see like, oh man, like he got behind the scenes, got the interview set up. Here we go. Like can't wait to read. That's always adds another layer to it when it's like, all right, we got the interview. We're gonna get to kind of see what's going on in his mind, like you mentioned. So really excited about that. I've got a big VJ Edgecombe pice that'll be up by the time most people are reading this.
Can't wait for that. VJ is so freaking awesome.
I love VJ, man. I hope people take it the right way. I feel like I've tried to do a better job of like moderate projections on comps and stuff like that. Like I talk about who I think like the high end comp is like maybe would approximate a certain player. But I think what makes VJ so interesting is I think like the floor is way better than people realize. Yeah. Like I think the floor is extremely secure, and you'll kind of see that in the article. And you mentioned it earlier, like it feels like so much of the air in the room this year has been about like Ace and Cooper and Dylan and like those guys that like there's just a lot of stuff that I got to go into in the film where it's like, man, I haven't really seen anybody talk about this yet or get into this yet. And like we got to have the discussion about Khaman Maluach today, and like there's gonna be stuff you go into your article about him that like just hasn't gotten out there. So make sure you're reading these articles.
It's a fun week for prospects that we're going to be covering this week, man. I mean, you're talking like two guys who are probably going to go in the top 10 at least. Like it's a big week for No Ceilings.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you were locked in NoCeilingsNBA.com. Follow Stephen at Stephen G Hoops on Twitter/X and Blue Sky. I'm Bound Boards on those same sites. Did I get everything? Is that all of it?
Yeah, just thanks everybody for
watching,
sure listening while you're
subscribe. Here. Yeah, all that jazz. Share it with your friends. Send your significant other a link to the podcast and don't explain it. And that's going to be it. We're going to wrap it up. We'll see you all next week. Peace.
Much love, y'all.